Thank you, Oliver. And our last speaker is Corrie Painter, who's at the Broad Institute. She's Associate Director of Operations and Scientific Outreach in our cancer program. And she also oversees patient-partnered genomic studies, including one she's been instrumental in, the Angiosacome Project. So she's going to talk a little bit about the work she's doing at the Broad. Corrie.
Well, I'd like to thank everybody here and the organizers for bringing me here to this meeting. It's fantastic. It appeals to the brains and the hearts of, I think, everybody in this room. I particularly loved your talk. I loved it. Spoke volumes of, I guess, similar trends to what I've experienced in my own life and what I'm going to talk about today. So you'd mentioned that you thought that maybe you were the only patient that was going to be here giving a talk, but I'm one as well. I'm surviving an exceedingly rare cancer called angiosarcoma. And when I was diagnosed with this disease that only gets about 300 people a year, I was also getting my PhD in biochemistry, so I'm also a structural biochemist by training. And I'll tell you what, it just threw all of the traditional career incentives down the drain. I didn't care at all about, even getting my PhD at the point. I didn't care about papers. I didn't care about notoriety or my name. I didn't care about anything except one thing. And that one thing was articulated very well already. A sense of urgency. Not just for myself, because I didn't think I was going to live. I wasn't supposed to live. But using whatever time that I had left to inspire other scientists to also maybe put the traditional career incentives aside for just a second and see what is everything we can do to shake the system in a way that will allow us to accelerate discoveries. What can we do, that we don't think is possible because we're so regimented in our ways of thinking? We go to school, we get our degrees, we do our investigations, and we're really smart. And we do push the envelope. But what happens when you're told you only have a couple months to live? You push it so hard that it breaks. And when it breaks open, all kinds of possibilities are afforded to you and to everybody that comes along with you for the ride. And so the work that I'm going to talk about today is largely focused on the intersection of patient advocacy and genomics research and what I hope could be kind of a transformative movement that will allow data to stream into everybody's labs and research efforts here and beyond. I have no idea how to use this. I'm just going to press a button. So I came to the Broad about 4 years ago. This is about 4 years after my diagnosis. I'm 8 years disease-free at this point. And I came because I wanted to do something other than just have my own lab. My studies had gone well. After my diagnosis, I went into cancer immunology, and I was offered a lab position. I had a K99, but I again, didn't think that I could actually be instrumental in helping to redesign the way that we do research. But at the Broad Institute, they have some really out-of-the-box ideas and models to approach research. And I was intrigued when I saw this one position for somebody who had a background as a patient, but also as a biomedical research scientist, and also somebody who had worked in the landscape of advocacy to come and help them conceive of and launch patient-partnered research efforts. And the point of these efforts were to accelerate the way that we can both collect data, to work with patients to acquire that data and build it, and to then release it to the public domain. The basic premise was pretty simple. What if we could generate a massively public available database of clinical, genomic, molecular, and patient-reported data in cancer to accelerate discoveries in the development of new treatment strategies? The problem in the US, at least, is that the vast majority of patients are treated in the community setting, which means that they go to a place where there is no research conducted. They get excellent clinical care. Their tumors are removed for their diagnostic purposes. They have who knows what type of EMR, because there's all kinds of ways that doctors can take notes either by their pens or by their iPads or their computers, and then none of them talk to each other. And so that data, although comes to bear on the individual patient, doesn't feed back into the research enterprise at all. For for the vast majority of people who are affected and impacted by cancer. But we live in an era of change. Patients are interconnected. Tell me that you haven't found 1,000 other patients like you, Peter, right? We find each other in social media, or on the internet, in groups. We are interconnected with each other. And the researchers just have to just come ask, hey, will you join us? Would you like to help us accelerate research and discovery in your disease? And I think that was kind of the underlying principle when I came. Like, why don't we just build something that's easy, that can move in and out? Let's not build another platform for people to come join us. Let's go meet them where they are. Let's just make a website. Let's make it easily shareable. Let's make the barrier to participation as low as possible. And let's do all of those things by working directly with patients who can inform us on what it even means to have a low barrier to participation when you have a terminal illness, or when you're sitting in a chemo infusion chair. So with those principles in mind, Nick Wagley, Dr. Wagley from Dana-Farber Cancer Institute and the Broad Institute, who is a medical oncologist and studies metastatic breast cancer, Nick and I developed the Metastatic Breast Cancer Project. And we didn't have a name when we started this project. We had the ideas that I told all of you. We told those same ideas to a bunch of patients with metastatic breast cancer and said, hey, what should we call this thing, and what should it look like? And together with dozens of patients that we knew in person and random patients we had never met, but asked in deferential ways on Twitter, we built this project. And they guided us through the entire process, not just the picture we chose, or the words on the website, or the words in the consent form, but the questions in the surveys that we used to try and understand the cohorts of people that sign up were totally redlined by the patients that helped us build this. We knew we wanted to figure out, like, hey, who's signing up that's HER2 positive? Who's signing up that has had metastatic disease for several years? And when we wrote those questions, we wrote them as scientists, and then we gave them to a bunch of patients, and they said, there's zero chance I would be able to answer that question. But if this is the information you're looking for and you ask it this other way, I would be able to answer it all day and all night. And so we took their advice, we took their feedback and their words, and we redrafted every question and every way that we thought about asking questions and deployed this project. And since we launched in October of 2015, we've had almost 4,900 women and men from across the country and Canada sign up and say, count me in. I want to be part of that. I want to help in any way that I can. And thank you, by the way, for making it easy. This is a graph. It's a little bit complicated, but if you just follow the blue line, I want to talk about the role that patients have, not just in the design of the project, but in socializing it. One of the things that we learned along the way is that when you empower patients to participate in the design and build of a study, it's theirs just as much as it's yours. They are such stakeholders in the process of rolling it out that they will help accrue patients. They will socialize it for you. You've built so much trust because you've built it with them, that when they put a single Facebook post in, if they happen to be a patient amplifier, several hundred others will join just from one Facebook post. Or if you have, your work put out by the press, it gets spread in social media, and yet more people will sign up. This is a cumulative accrual graph showing our trend line all the way up to where we are today, which is almost, like I said, almost 4,900 people. And it's just continuing to grow. And it grows by word of mouth, spread by patient to patient. It spreads in a bit by posts in social media where patients take the kits that we send them to collect saliva, and they post a picture of it and take a selfie, and they basically say, this was easy, and I'm going to be able to help somebody else down the road, if not myself. To date, we have collected many hundreds of medical records, tumor samples. We've sequenced many hundred tumor samples and deposited them in the public domain, which I'll talk about in a minute. And I love this number. We've collected almost 900 blood biopsy samples from patients all over the country, just by designing a simple kit that gets shipped to them with a FedEx return label that comes back to the genomics platform at the Broad. And we've done this with patients that are treated at over 1,000 different institutes across the country. What we found is that if you build one consent form and you leverage the patient's will, you can get around a lot of the hurdles that we've heard about today, right? Patients have the right to decide and determine what they do with their data and with whom they share it. And if you provide a mechanism for them to do it, they will leverage it all day long, and they will make sure that their samples get put into research. So we're in the process of sharing the data that we generate, which is whole exome sequencing. We do, whole exome sequencing of tumor normal match samples, about 20,000 genes. And we match that with a huge amount of clinical data. Then we put it, right now we have it living in CBio portal, but we'd like to deposit this data in any available database where people can find it. So if you have ideas for me, please let me know. We would be happy to consider ways to work to get this data out into other places. So about every 6 months, wherever we are in the process, we stop, we clean everything up, and we do a data deposition. So right now in the public domain for metastatic breast cancer, we have 157 samples that are clinically annotated available. And the website to get here is mbcproject.org. And this is probably the only talk where somebody will say, please take your phones out, and look down and check it out. So by all means, get your devices out and check out this website. I want to highlight what happens when you build a cohort of patients that are engaged. We sent out a follow-up survey to the entire cohort of patients that had provided consent to see where are they now with respect to their disease. What treatments had they been on recently? Can we learn something about their experience with disease in a snapshot in time to do longitudinal follow-ups? So we sent a survey that had 6 questions, again, built in with the patients in the community. And it asked about, where is your disease now? Where has it ever been? Where was it when you were diagnosed? What treatments have you been on? And within a week, we collected back over 1,000 fully completed surveys from people living with metastatic breast cancer. I mean, that is a huge amount of data to be able to collect in 1 week from people that can give us unbelievable amounts of information based on their experience with disease. These are like really small graphs, but I just wanted to put them up there to show you that we can crunch the data really fast too, and we can take a look at where the disease was when people signed up, or where it's ever been versus where it is now. And then we can, couple that to the underlying clinical data and everything else that we have already collected for them. We've built the study with Advocacy Partners. When we first started, we had the first 6 advocacy partners listed here. And as we've grown, we've been approached by several other people in advocacy groups that want to help share this message in order to reach as many patients as possible. And it's just been tremendous to work with so many different groups in such a collaborative way. I had mentioned those saliva selfies. Here's pictures that you can take a look at yourself. These are patients that have terminal disease that are smiling because they get to participate in research. They're so happy that they get these boxes in the mail, and all they have to do is provide a little bit of saliva, and they know that they've done something to help other people. They know, in the words of one, that they're able to leave a legacy and hopefully one day a cure. And then the question came, can we do this in other cancers? We piloted this in a very common cancer. We piloted it in one that has very established advocacy groups. What happens if you want to do this in a different one? Can you recapitulate those same kinds of results? So by a show of hands, how many people in this room want to say, I bet this woman did the next one in angiosarcoma? How many people think that that's what happened? You guys are right. So angiosarcoma is it's just awful. Only 300 people a year get it. It's extraordinarily deadly. Most people do not survive. You can see the Kaplan-Meier curve right here. And when I was diagnosed with this disease, as a scientist, this is one of the first papers I found, and I got a sense of vertigo looking down that steep curve. I was like, there is no way I'm surviving this disease. It's just not going to happen. So to say that I'm happy to be here 8 years later is probably the understatement of a lifetime. So we have one Facebook group where everybody kind of funnels. One, right? Because where else are just a handful of patients going to go? They find us, We help them from everything from like which doctors have seen more than one case in their lifetime to what side effects they could expect when they're on therapy. And as a result of building this community, we've also built a mechanism that we can leverage in order to drive our research. So I went into the community one day and I said, hey, how many of you are alive with the disease and willing to donate med records and tumor samples? And within an hour, 90 people said, I would totally do that, no problem. And so we built the Angiosarcoma Project off of the scaffold of the Metastatic Breast Cancer Project, hoping that in the course of a year, we would get like 100 people to sign up with this exceedingly rare cancer. And it turned out that we got more than 100. We got over 300 people. In the last 18 months, we've had about 340 people that have signed up and said, count me in. For such an exceedingly rare cancer, I think that that is pretty tremendous. The orange dots are people in the United States that signed up of their own volition. And the open circles are people that lost somebody to the disease. We built a portion of this website dedicated to loved ones so that they could enter information about their loved ones' experiences after they passed away. And we've learned so much from the experiences that loved ones have, just FYI. We've already deposited, as of yesterday, 48 samples from 36 patients in the public domain. This is a snapshot of what you can see if you just go to CBioPortal or you go to our project website where we have a link and all of the associated methods that we use to generate this data. And something that was very striking to us and our computational biologists when we generated this data is in this one graph down here. You don't have to look at all the graphs. I'm just trying to show kind of the fact that there's a lot of data that you can drop down this add chart, and there's just like 30 or 40 more graphs that you can add here, and then you can kind of parse through the data however you'd like. But if you look at the tumor mutation burden plot right here, you can see that there's this outlier graph right there. You can see that there's a bar with like several patients in there, and they all have very high TMB. And in immuno-oncology, that is a hallmark of people that are responding to immunotherapies. So we took a look, and it turned out that those patients, 8 of the 9 that had the extraordinarily high TMB, all had angiosarcoma that arose in the head, neck, face, and scalp. And it turns out that that's the largest demographic of people that get angiosarcoma. Elderly white men and women that get head, neck, scalp angiosarcoma. We hypothesized that the reason that they had high TMB is because they had UV damage. So sun comes down, interacts with your DNA outside of a melanocyte, and this time in an endothelial cell, which is angiosarcoma, which is the site of origin, and causes cancer. We went to look at the patient-reported data to see, well, did any of these people with head, neck, scalp angiosarcoma get compassionate care use of an immunotherapy checkpoint? Because why not, right? Doctors sometimes will prescribe all kinds of things, and if you look at real-world data, you can sometimes glean some insight from that. Turns out the answer was yes. We had 2 patients that had head, neck, scalp angio that had metastatic disease, progressed through a series of treatments, were given pembrolizumab by their doctors under compassionate care, and had complete and durable responses. This is one example from patient's medical record right here, where you can see this 65-year-old man received, has no evidence of disease to this day. And if you actually look at the notes in this person's record, the doctor turned off the presentation. The doctor actually wrote, "This is just amazing," after seeing the massive reduction in tumor burden. I mean, how many times have you looked at a medical record and seen those words? This is just amazing. And this is not the only person. There was another person with a very similar experience, and both of these patients signed up for the project online and told us about their experiences, which then allowed us to prioritize their tissue for sequencing, and sure enough, they have some of the highest markers of TMB of all of the patients in the entire study. So we went on to launch another one of these in metastatic prostate cancer. And just yesterday, we went ahead and launched one in gastroesophageal cancer. And we're building one in osteosarcoma, and we're building one for brain cancer, and we have no intention of stopping. This is just what it looks like when you collect the images of patients across different cancers who spontaneously take those selfies. There are men, and not that this is like a high enough end to make any conclusions, but if you notice, all the ladies are taking selfies and the men have pictures taken of them. So glean what you want from that. But, you get a rich diversity of age and gender and race for people that are signing up for these studies. And they have one thing in common, and it's that sense of urgency that Peter talked about. It's that sense of urgency that, we each can do something to contribute to the understanding of a disease that has so negatively impacted us to try and make a positive impact for somebody else. So some takeaways that I'd like to leave you with are that, you can tap into existing communities and you can ask patients to join you. You have to think actively about diversity. You have to think actively about people that may not be in social media and how you might be able to reach them through other people that are in social media or boots on the ground. You have to work with patients before, during, and after the study. Don't build something and then invite people in after, right? If you build it with them, it'll speak to them the entire way. And authenticity is absolutely critical. You can't have a project like this where you're trying to reach directly into people's lives that are undergoing such traumatic experiences unless you are real and unless the message that you have is very real and grounding. And with that, there's so many people, I probably could put like 400 slides here for acknowledgements, but obviously all of the patients that helped us build these and that are participating along with our team. Nick Wagley is the director of all of these projects, along with me and Ellie Van Allen and Adam Bass, who are the scientific champions of the individual projects. Thank you.